start the recording, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me now share the screen with you on the defining the decade. All right, here we go. So started off in the 50s. Okay, advertisement, very good. We talked about the age of consumerism. Okay, McCarthyism. When we talk about McCarthyism, and again, we can kind of even put this here as we're talking through it. McCarthyism was the search for what? Like what was the fear? The fear with McCarthyism was what?
Communism.
Very good. The communism and the infiltration of it, right? So you had, Allison said, spies, communism. Remember, the fear was that they were here. They were embedded in the government. They were embedded in these different parts of American life. And so that was the real fear. Joseph McCarthy, it's named after him because he really spearheaded the effort. Remember, it does appear that he did exaggerate claims, right? He said he had a list of so many people in government that were card-carrying communists. That appears to be exaggerated. But now, again, as we tried to point out, were there communist spies in America? Absolutely. It just hard to know how many there actually were. So America was going through the stage of, at what point are we assuming people are guilty before letting them start off as innocent? And at what point are we overstepping liberties here to find those people? Middle class became prominent, very good. We have the Rosa Parks incident. We have the bus boycott. We have Elvis Presley. Again, when you even look at the 60s, it's funny to see that Elvis was seen as being really pushing the envelope in the 50s. When we get into the 60s, you're going to see much more. And again, I was just playing you a clip there from the Beatles, Revolution. They want to start a revolution. I mean, this is the countercultural movement of the 60s is very different. What we see in the 50s, it's a golden age of TV. And guess what the TV shows look like? Mom, dad, little kids. Their problems are really simple. It's like, hey, somebody at school today cheated on their homework. Should I turn them in or not? And it's like a bunch of third graders like, I don't know, maybe we should. We're going to ask dad. And it's really, really nice. It's really, really friendly. It's really, really family-oriented TV. We have the baby boom. People making back from war. There's this boom. And children that are coming out at that point in time. We have the space race. Again, this is kind of the scare is Sputnik. You got the Russians that make it get a satellite in space before the Americans do. So JFK decides that that's going to be part of the push there in the 1960s is the space race, and we're gonna eventually here make it to the moon in the 70s or 1969. We then have the Cold War that's still going on. We have Eisenhower as president. We have Brown versus Board of Education. I love whoever put the phrase on here, white picket fence. I always love to use that as like in your head. What do people picture the 50s? They picture that everyone has small home, white picket fence. They got a dog in the front yard. That's just kind of what people envision the 50s, and it's reinforced by TV. Hydrogen bomb. Again, I tried to show you guys that video there just to show you the extent of which the hydrogen bomb dwarfs the bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, we're exponentially larger weapon, and we have it now. The Russians have it now, and we're going to see the UK and the French also pick up with that in the 1950s as well. Nuclear bombs are out there. People are concerned about those efforts. Contradictory examples. I love that. Walt Disney. This is the age. We didn't even talk much about that. That was in your book. Disney. It's the friendly, kind of soft TV shows and movies that kids really like. It's getting more and more oriented around children. You also have the first Academy Awards. Great job, group number one, 1950s. That's very well done. 1960s, again, notice the change here. Look at the first three things that you guys mentioned. Vietnam War. We are getting more and more embedded in that. There's disruption. There's people really frustrated with that in society. Anti-war protest. Again, I showed you guys the video the other day about that. But again, I call it, you can call it hippies. I was always used to calling it hippies. Also call it the countercultural movement. The culture, meaning what the culture was in the 1950s. Everyone, hey, you go punch in and punch out of your job. You work, 40, 50 hours a week. You come home to your wife and kids. Got a lot of young people that say, look, I don't know that I want to work that type of job. I don't know that I want to go to college. If I go to college, actually, I don't know that I want to take the same job as my parents. I think I want a different life. I want to be single longer. These start being the pushbacks of the 1960s. Then you have the nuclear threats. Absolutely. This begins to really heat up with the Cuban Missile Crisis as we begin to see nukes that could actually hit America. Very good. The moon landing, I told you guys, like my fifth grade teacher looked at me really funny because the first paper I ever wrote was that I thought the moon landing was fake. I have since, I definitely do not say that to an astronaut, by the way. If you haven't seen the footage of someone telling that to Buzz Aldrin, the 90-year-old Buzz Aldrin who then smokes the lady right in the face, that's a pretty interesting internet video but yeah, I mean, a 90-year-old astronaut like was not taking any crap from that reporter. So anyway, don't say that directly to an astronaut. I would just warn you. So you got the moon landing in 1969. You got America. Looks like we're stepping out into being the country that's out in front of everything. JFK's death, again, I spent a lot of time on that with you guys. It's really seen as this moment of things were looking hopeful. And now he's gone, and we're going to have Lyndon Johnson step in. TV is just growing. I mean, you have much more television shows. It seems to be much more a part of the, Madison wants to see the video of that. I can pull it up here in the class. The revolution of social norms. Again, there's a lot of pushback on young people doing this cookie cutter type of family, of women having a family at a young age. There's a lot of pushback in the 60s of women that they wanted, they wanted birth control. They wanted to delay having kids. They didn't want to be, 27 and 3 kids and live in a white picket fence. They wanted to prolong kind of being single and being able to date and things like that. Civil rights in the 1960s. And guys, again, in 68, it really gets set ablaze. We had the Martin Luther King Jr., who really wanted a peaceful solution to civil rights. You had Malcolm X, who really wanted a violent insurrection to push back on this. Both are assassinated. Martin Luther King's assassinated in 68. We have Malcolm X that's assassinated also, which just adds more fuel to the fire of revolution of the civil rights movement should push back in a harsher way. And JFK, and Robert Kennedy being assassinated too in 68. Guys, you can understand why in 68, it seems like the country is just pulling apart. We went from the 50s of this calm, we're not in a major war. We have a president that's seems to keep everything under control. We tended to see better relations with the Russians until our spy plane gets shot down. And then in the 60s, it just seems like by the end of the 60s, things are coming undone very quickly. Woodstock, Cuban Missile Crisis, very good. Contradictory examples, guys. That's why I love to show you the Beach Boys and the Beatles. Like the Beach Boys are like we're tan, we're like the good old boys. Like we like, guys, one of their famous songs is "Be True to Your School." It's about like loving your high school, being proud of it. And then you got the Beatles are like revolution and singing songs about like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which is about LSD. It's an interesting, the two of the most popular bands of the day. You've got the really clean cut guys, and then you got the, hey, we're going to sing about doing LSD guys as well. So it's a fascinating dynamic. And so, yeah, that's a great example of contradictory characteristics. All right, 1970s. Let's rock and roll here. I want to come back to this, defining the period, after I show you guys a little bit of what happens in 1970s that really cause a lot of the issues here to just break apart. So we have the election of 1968, which we talked about yesterday. And let me share this with you guys. Election of 1968, there's this weird dynamic in the South. Where you see, again, I believe, Allison helped me out with my colors there. It's like a brown or burgundy-ish there. Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. They go for George Wallace, who is an anti-integration candidate. He wants blacks and whites to be separated, and he thinks that that's a states' rights issue. So Nixon wins. Again, look at the electoral. Look at the popular vote. Again, 56% there, 43% of the popular vote. It's not this overwhelming majority of the popular vote, but electoral vote, of course, we see puts him over the top there. And then we're going to have a couple of situations that are going to be very, very difficult for Nixon to deal with. The first is going to be this My Lai massacre. I'm going to turn the volume of it off and just, I don't know if it'll actually, let me see if it'll let me show it. So what we have here is a situation where remember when I talked to you guys about counterinsurgency and that the American troops, I'm going to turn off my video here just so it'll play a little bit better, but just so you guys can get a sense of some of the video interaction here. Remember a couple of things that was going on in the Vietnam War is we had the helicopter attacks where we would bring soldiers in and drop them into valleys. Okay, that was a major part of the fighting. We also had a situation where we were trying to do counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency was trying to find who the Viet Cong were. Remember, they didn't dress as soldiers. They would meet and they would plan and they would come out the next day with explosives. They would dress as normal civilians. They would come out. And so the My Lai massacre occurs because we have intel that says that there was a meeting going on in this village of My Lai, and that these men were meeting and preparing this large explosive attack inside the city. So what ends up happening is the soldiers here, we get intelligence that there's going to be this morning meeting. And so when the American soldiers arrive to the village, their initial orders were to attack and destroy all the people at this meeting. Well, when they get there, it is mostly women and children that are in the village. There are not a lot of men there. There is still an order that is carried out, and the order is to go ahead and execute those that were there for the meeting. And so it results in hundreds dying. Not a lot of weapons were there, and there were women and children killed in this attack. Now, guys, when this hits the newspapers back home, it is horrific. We have a situation where this kind of plays into all of the concerns that many had back home, which was, are we being too broad in our attacks? Are we ensuring we're protecting the villagers? And so we actually are going to have multiple soldiers court-martialed and are brought in and asked to describe what happened, how did this occur? And guys, there's a back and forth over exactly who's to blame for this and where the order came out, but eventually we do have soldiers that are prosecuted based on this attack. We then have Kent State that we talked about the other day, where we have protesters at colleges. 4 are going to actually be killed, 19 injured here at Kent State, protesting the war. So Nixon is in office. But again, I mentioned to you guys, triangulation with China is this great plan by Nixon to say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take on China to break them away from the Russians. I'm going to share the screen with you guys to get back on our Google chat there. And so he breaks China away from the Russians. And so the Chinese are actually going to work with America in several trade policy agreements. Then we have Watergate. Okay, so guys, 1972, we have an election, we have a campaign where Nixon is going to overwhelmingly win. Okay, Nixon wins the 1972 election. Remember, it looks like the war in Vietnam. He has got it more under control. He has taken broken the Chinese off from the Russians. He's done things that are universally popular with even the left, like the EPA, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. And in the build-up to the election, guys, we have a break-in in the Watergate Hotel. Now, why is that important? So the Democrat National Committee was meeting there. And so what begins to be stirred, and the questions that are being asked is, well, why did these robbers break into the Watergate Hotel and steal very little? And as the prosecution begins to dig into these criminals, they begin to find out that some of them have connection to, by the way, I'm going to put it here on this Google Doc, the worst re-election name ever. So Nixon's re-election team calls themselves the Committee to Re-elect the President, and they use the acronym CREEP, which is like, I don't even understand why you would ever do that. But so they're working for re-election for the president, and they broke in to spy on the other party, the Democrat National Party. Again, Nixon won overwhelmingly, but the question begins to be asked, what exactly happened here? Was this a coordinated effort on behalf of the president? So yeah, there you go. What we begin to see are questions, and the question that people keep asking is, what did the president know, and when did he know it? Well, guys, how are you ever going to know what the president knew and when he knew it? Like, how could you ever know when the president knew what the re-election committee was doing? Like, this seems impossible to prove, right? How could you ever know that exactly? All right, guys, in one of the most bizarre turns in history, in modern history here, to Allison's point, Richard Nixon was paranoid, okay? And remember, I told you guys this. He said he wasn't going to run for re-election again. He was paranoid. When he comes into office, he has a secret recording mechanisms installed in the Oval Office that every time someone started talking, it would record the audio of whatever that person said. Okay. So he told very few people about this. So there's one day where there's a Senate hearing, and we have a senator that asked the question, so, hey, is there any, way that we would have any record of conversations that went on in the White House? And one of Nixon's aides said, well, I mean, there's that recording system. And the senator says, hold on, wait, what? What are you talking about? He goes, well, there's a recording system. I mean, it's recorded. It's all being recorded. And all of a sudden, the Senate starts saying, well, we want to hear these tapes. And guys, Nixon claims, as we go way back, and this is the last kind of discussion question for chapter 37 is, hey, I don't got to give over these tapes. I have executive privilege. And guys, the term executive privilege has been tossed around a few times in American history. Eisenhower used it. As a matter of fact, even Washington's cabinet talked about this. Does anybody, can you define for me, what does that actually mean? The phrase executive privilege. There is a lot of background for what would be considered executive privilege. Can anybody give me an example of what we would mean by executive privilege? So let me give you, I'll give you the best example. Okay, yes, Taylor's right. The president can hold certain things from the public. I'll give you an example. His advisor, as a direct advisor to the president, everything that they tell the president, they don't have to tell the public or release it. And the reason why is because the president wants to be able to have open, honest conversations with his advisors and say, give me your recommendations. What are they? Okay, I'm going to make the decision now based on that. So he wants those to remain private so that, hey, you just tell me, I don't care if it's popular or not, give me your honest opinion. So there are things like that that are protected. As an advisor to the president, you don't have to go tell publicly what you told the president. He can claim executive privilege. Those are privileged conversations. But guys, what about recordings that could show that the president knew about an illegal break-in involving spying on another campaign? Is that protected by executive privilege? Well, who could determine that? The president says it is, Congress says it's not, so who should step in and help determine whether those tapes are protected by executive privilege or not? Very good, Allison, the Supreme Court. So this goes all the way up, it's fast tracked to the US Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court makes the decision that this is not covered by executive privilege. That yes, all the tapes should not be released to the public, but a judge can go in and listen to the tapes and figure out, is there certain things here that Nixon said that actually implicate him in this? And guys, Nixon turns over the tapes and there's this missing 18 minutes. The courts battle back and forth, and eventually Nixon has a situation where he fires his attorney general and he fires a special investigator. And so this all plays out, and eventually what ends up happening is there ends up being a tape where Nixon talks about the potential of trading of money and ensuring that certain people have what they need to get this done and ensure that the information is passed along. Now, again, if you listen to the tapes, if you know the context, it does appear that the president is talking about this break-in and about how to cover it up after the fact. And guys, like so many political crimes, there's the crime itself, but more often than not, you know what ends up getting politicians? The cover-up. Okay, that is usually easier to prove that there was malicious intent than just the original action. And so, guys, here we are. We have a president that's overwhelmingly reelected, but it appears he was part of a cover-up. There were even times where he asked the CIA to cause for a diversion, so the FBI would go look over here and deal with this diversion rather than investigate Watergate. And guys, the Republican Party comes to him and he starts talking to the senators, and they tell him, Mr. President, we're not going to vote to keep you in office. So the best thing you can do is to resign. And so, guys, we have the first time in American history that the president of the United States is going to step away from office. It's this incredible moment. This is where you see him getting on the plane, the first president to ever resign. It's just absolutely kind of surreal to see a president of the United States who was so overwhelmingly reelected step away from that. It's just this very surreal moment. His vice president comes in. One of you guys put it in the chat about a pardon. President Ford decides to pardon him. By the way, why? Why do you pardon a guy that's seemingly done so many things that would be problematic? Why would you pardon that guy? Like, why not just let it play out? Why not let, the prosecution play out? Why not let him go to court? Why would you pardon the president that's accused of so many things that there would be major issues with?
It'd probably be a pretty bad look on the country if one of our presidents is, a criminal, which they all are. But I mean, like, if it came out to the public.
Yeah, I mean, and to Racer's point, like, how long would that play out for? Think about a prosecution of a president. We're talking, this can play out for 10 years. And what Ford's position was is like, dude, he resigned. He is embarrassed. He is shamed forever in American history. How long do we want this to play out? Don't we want, the Vietnam War is still going on. We have issues with our economy. We're going to enter into a period of stagnation where the economy is going to start flatlining. And so Ford says, we've got to move forward. Pardon the pun there. So what ends up happening here is that ends up costing him in the 1976 election, because when he runs for office, he seemingly, what did he do? He stood with someone who was corrupt. He pardoned him. And so, guys, we're going to have Gerald Ford that is going to lose the 1976 election to a man named Jimmy Carter. And again, we see Jimmy Carter, great comparison there, Mr. Corn, to the Trump impeachments, right? That if you stand, if you fight back for somebody and you just ask for things to move along, that can be used as a dig against yourself. And so what we see here, guys, is he loses the 1976 election to a guy, Jimmy Carter, who had no real, he was the governor of Georgia, but honestly, he was a peanut farmer. He was a part-time preacher. He was really like, I'm not a politician. That was basically his slow, I'm not a politician. Vote for me. Haven't you had enough of the Republicans that have done all this corrupt stuff? Vote for me. And Nixon wins. Carter wins in 1976. So guys, look at the 70s. Look at the shift here. And I want to go back to that doc you guys created. You have the era in the 70s at which we have a non-politician elected president. We have an energy crisis. We have stagnation in the economy. We do have the women's rights movement that's going to continue to pick up steam, which is going to be largely driven by a Supreme Court case, which is one of the most controversial Supreme Court cases of all time, which is Roe versus Wade. And when we talk about Roe versus Wade, it says that states cannot ban abortion in the first 2 trimesters. Again, trimesters. This is a term we didn't hear a lot about politically till Roe versus Wade. And so what we have here is a situation where the Supreme Court steps into states and restricts what they can do in the topic of restricting abortion. Guys, abortion has always, well, I say always, going back to the 1950s, 60s, been a hot button issue. And with the Supreme Court weighing in, you got people that love it and you got people that hate it. You got people that think that was the proper thing for the federal government to do, and you got some people who think that should have been reserved for the states. You got women's movements that say this is the greatest thing for women because it protects their rights with the youngborn and their rights moving forward, and it can be added on. And then you even have a women's group that opposes it. And you have a lot of other groups, conservative groups that oppose it. So guys, it becomes a flashpoint. And by the way, honestly, there you go. Margaret Sanger, thank you for that. Margaret Sanger brought this up early on about abortion, and we talked about even in the 1920s. But guys, we see this as a major flashpoint from the 70s on to today. What do we do with abortion? Is it a state decision or a federal decision? This really is the beginning of that really being in the middle of the public consciousness. And guys, we leave Vietnam. And in leaving Vietnam, we have a major issue. As we begin to not want to fund the Vietnam War anymore, what ends up happening is we have a moment where the troops are going to be moving out so fast that there's going to be an overrun of the embassy. The North Vietnamese are going to come down into South Vietnam. and they're going to control the entire continent of Vietnam. So guys, the communists are going to move down south, and now when we leave, they're going to take over the entire country in 1975. And this is a question we're going to deal with later as we talk about kind of the, the broader themes here. To a lot of people, this looks like America lost the war. I mean, if we start at the beginning of the war, remember I asked you guys repeatedly, like, what's our objective? Like, what is America trying? We're trying to contain communism. 1975, we see communism as we leave Vietnam, as we decide how long are we going to fight this war. It's time for the South Vietnamese to stand up and defend their own area. As we see them move down to the South, we didn't contain. Now, again, a question I love to ask students is, did we lose the war? Okay. Did we actually lose the war? Because you could make an argument both ways, right? You could say, yeah, we did, but we lost it because we refused to fight. Or you could say, no, we actually won. After we left, the country went back over to the communists. But either way, we didn't achieve our objective. It wasn't what we wanted, the result that we ended up wanting. So here we are in 1976. We've had a president resign. We've had a new president come in. We have ceded Vietnam to the communists. We have had multiple issues here when it comes to what is this going to look like moving forward as a country when it comes to our economy, when it comes to dealing with the different economic issues of stagnation, of a recession. We have issues about what is the proper role of affirmative action. Should we start having additional civil rights legislation come in to help protect these type of rights? And then, guys, we also have a situation where in the Middle East, in Iran, in Palestine, in Saudi Arabia, we're beginning to have groups that want to throw out the European powers. And this is where we're going to see the birth of modern terrorism in the Middle East. And so, guys, again, just as an overview, I know that I wanted today to really look at the 50s, look at the era in which you had people who believe that, hey, the white picket fence image, Dwight Eisenhower's president, the 60s, the hopefulness at the beginning after we get out of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Then we have all the assassinations and the disruption about where's the country going to go. You have the beginning of the 70s where it looks like, well, maybe Nixon, he's got his quirks, but maybe he's getting things under control. And then boom, the explosion of the Watergate situation, the explosion of the resignation of the president. We have terrorism that's picking up in the late 70s from these Islamically aligned groups. And then we have an economy that seems to be on the fringes here because of the issues of an oil embargo, and because of the issues around stagnation, which is just meaning that it's kind of stalling out here. And so that's really where we end up. And I wanted you guys to have that review before we go into the test on Monday. So again, just use that document, look over these terms as you're studying for the test, and we'll knock that out on Monday. And if you guys have any questions, again, feel free to email me as we talk through this. And again, any questions as you're reviewing. So I appreciate the feedback there from you guys today. And I hope you guys have a good one. I will send you guys this video, by the way, afterwards, if this will be helpful too. So I will talk to you guys later. Hope you guys have a great weekend.